Hello, you're watching Shalom World News. I'm Dana Villa from Chicago, USA. Here are the latest headlines from around the world. The prayer intention of the Holy Father for the month of August is dedicated to the upcoming World Youth Day in Lisbon, Portugal, which begins on August 1. In the Pope video for the month of August, Pope Francis is inviting everyone to pray for the WYD through the Pope's Worldwide Prayer Network. The video was produced in collaboration with the Lisbon 2023 WYD Foundation and the Dicastery for Laity, Family, and Life. In his message, the pontiff emphasizes his invitation to young people to quickly take the path of bearing the joyful witness to the gospel. Pope Francis is also praying for a world that places love at its core at a time when people are at war. With just a few more days left for the largest youth gathering in the Catholic sphere, Shalom World has made elaborate arrangements to provide extensive coverage of the World Youth Day taking place in Lisbon from August 1st through the 6th. About 1.5 million young believers from more than 150 nations are expected to gather in the city for the event. Shalom World is a media partner of WYD, and we are providing live coverage of all important events spanning the main venues on all 6 days. Preparations are also in place to bring you all the live events connected with the visit of Pope Francis to Lisbon from August 2nd through the 6th. A special studio has been set up in the Portuguese capital for broadcasting special programs, which will include interviews of World Youth Day dignitaries. For the latest updates from WYD venues, log on to the website of SW News. The names of 2 judges of the International Criminal Court have been put on the Russian government's list of wanted individuals. Both Rosario Salvatore Aitala and Tomoko Akane were placed on Russia's wanted list. The International Criminal Court issued an arrest order for Russian President Vladimir Putin in March on charges of kidnapping children in Ukraine. In another news development, 4-time Olympic medalist Olga Karlin of Ukraine was disqualified from this year's fencing championships in Milan on Thursday when she refused to shake hands with her Russian opponent Anna Smirnova. Meanwhile, Secretary General of Caritas Internationalis, Alistair Dutton, has expressed solidarity and gratitude to all the volunteers of Caritas Ukraine and Caritas Spes for helping nearly 3 million people since the conflict began on February 24, 2022. Bishops in Canada have shared their thoughts on their attempts to help and make amends with the Indigenous communities a year after the Holy Father made a trip to the nation to apologize for the Catholic Church's treatment of Indigenous people. The head of the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops, Bishop Raymond Poisson, said they recognized in Pope Francis the Lord's mercy during his days in Canada. He said the Holy Father had put a lot of personal and physical effort in being there. His interactions with Indigenous peoples constituted and still reflect a living manifestation of a joint effort of the Holy Father with the Church in Canada to walk together and explore new rays of hope within the communities. Here in the United States, a federal court has ruled in the Tice-Harroff versus Johnson lawsuit that the Biden administration has to pay $65,000 in attorney's fees for violating regulatory laws. The administration was accused of illicitly depriving women of the option of fertility awareness-based methods of family planning as part of health insurance coverage mandated under the Affordable Care Act. This left women only with coverage for contraceptives and abortifacient drugs and devices. The plaintiff, Harroff, was assisted by the legal advocacy group Alliance Defending Freedom, or ADF. Its senior counsel, Julie Marie Blake, said in a statement that the administration cannot impose its own preferred contraceptive methods on all women without permitting a real public comment period as required by law. She said the successful resolution of this case benefits all women who may wish to use fertility awareness-based methods and can now keep their preferred doctor and insurance coverage. A binding agreement has been reached between the Holy See and Vietnam for the Vatican to have a resident Apostolic Nuncio in the Asian nation. This announcement was made in a joint statement following the visit of Vietnamese President Vo Van Thong to the Vatican. The president of the communist nation also had a private audience with Pope Francis. The statement concluded that the papal representative will be a bridge to advance relations between Vietnam and the Holy See. On Thursday, July 28, the Holy Father sent a message to the participants of the Medjugorje International Youth Festival in Bosnia and Herzegovina, urging them to open their hearts to discern the will of God. The pontiff told them not to be afraid of his will, but to place all their trust in his grace. The annual festival takes place in the Marian pilgrim site, bringing together young people from all over the world. Pope Francis expressed hope that when young believers spend time in Eucharistic adoration and confession at the festival, they would realize that God's will is something to be embraced. He also cautioned them, saying, quote, "Let there be no place in your life for selfishness or laziness," end quote. He concluded by encouraging them to be enthusiastic missionaries of the new evangelization. According to the World Health Organization, or WHO, the conflict in Sudan has caused a health crisis for 3.4 million people who have been forced to flee either within the nation or outside. There have been cases of infectious diseases and other illnesses among displaced people who have sought refuge in difficult-to-reach areas with few medical resources since the conflict between the Sudanese army and paramilitary group Rapid Support Forces, which broke out in mid-April. Over two-thirds of hospitals remain out of service amid increasing reports of attacks on health facilities. WHO has so far verified 51 attacks on health facilities, resulting in 10 deaths and 24 injuries. Access has also been cut off for urgent medical care. The producer of the hit movie Sound of Freedom made a presentation of his movie on July 25 at the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. During the screening, Eduardo Verastegui announced an initiative that targets rescuing 85,000 migrant children and youth from Latin America. He said they comprise the children and adolescents who entered the United States unaccompanied by adults in 2022, and their whereabouts are now unknown. This rescue project is being supported by Congressman Chris Smith and Roger Severino of the Heritage Foundation. The Sound of Freedom narrates the mission of former security agent Tim Ballard, who was instrumental in rescuing trafficked children. Jim Caviezel of the Passion of the Christ fame is portraying the role of Ballard in the movie. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, is urging Chinese firms to disclose business links they may have with the Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities. They are likely to face compliance risk and supply chain disruptions if they operate in the Xinjiang region, where Beijing is oppressing the Muslim minority, as per the new guidance issued by SEC. In 2021, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act was signed by President Joe Biden. It blocks imports from the Chinese province unless a firm can prove the products were made without utilizing forced labor. The SEC is seeking more prominent disclosure about the risks related to the role of the Beijing government in the Chinese company's operations. On Thursday, July 27, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called for greater diplomatic efforts in the Korean Peninsula. He urged both North and South Korea to pick up their peace negotiations. This comes on the 70th anniversary of the armistice that ended the war in the peninsula, dividing it into two and creating a demilitarized buffer zone. But since both nations were unable to agree on a formal peace treaty, the conflict was never formally resolved. Guterres said the Korean Peninsula remains divided amid rising geopolitical tensions, an increased nuclear risk, and a disregard for international norms. Global rights group Amnesty International has reported that the Iranian government is intensifying its oppressive tactics against women and children for defying compulsory veiling laws. The group revealed that the government has stepped up attacks on women and girls who opt not to wear headscarves in public. Women without veils have been refused access to banking services and public transport, apart from being prohibited from taking examinations. Hundreds of companies were forced to shut down because they did not enforce the requirement for veils. It has been reported that since April 15, over 1 million women received text messages warning them that their vehicles could be confiscated if they were found behind the wheels without the Islamic headscarf. And those are your latest headlines. Do join us tomorrow. In the meantime, you can visit swnews.org for more updates. Shalom.